You know, as an elementary school principal, this is what I do now. And boy, does this work. I said, if I tried this with 650 kids at the high school level, I'd probably still be standing there. But I love this, it's great. So welcome, and thank you for coming. So I'm Scott Farnsworth, resident of the town of Hartford on the HCC board. I'm just welcoming folks here this evening. This evening is meant for all of us to hear about the really neat things going on in our town. About 5 or 6 months ago, we were in this very room. We had the very same camera. We heard from our friends in Rutland about Project Vision and what they did in that town to try to turn things around. And if you've watched the news as of late, you know they're getting some really strong kudos in terms of the good work they're doing over there. Hartford, I think, is also getting some very strong kudos in terms of some of the work that we're doing in the town of Hartford. So we're quite proud of that, and we want to learn more about that and try to find out how we can help our elected town officials in the very difficult sometimes and challenging work that they're doing. So tonight, our goal is to hear from some of these fine folks who are giving up their evening, maybe provide a little bit of feedback, and see how we can continue to unite. HCC, Hartford Community Coalition, is still around and actually going quite strong. We have partnered a little bit with some consultants from the Marlboro College who are helping us with our next strategic steps, of which there are several. We'll hear more about that in a little while. We try to time this out, so the fact that I'm 5 minutes late already means I need to get off the stage. We do have a fair amount of technology going on, a number of PowerPoint slides and so forth, so I'll just quickly share with you the agenda for the evening. Once I remove myself from the stage, we're going to hear from our folks who are leading the Town Manager Search Committee in town, hearing how that's going and providing a little bit of feedback. Then we're going to hear from our new Chief of Police, Chief Caston, for several minutes and hear what's going on with our Hartford Police Department. Soon thereafter, our select board will be speaking about their budget process. As we all know, that is, they're making a conscious decision to come to us early to talk about the town, the needs of our town. So we are anxious to hear from them. And then our folks are from the local town school board are here. Talk about their challenges and some of the evolution of education in the state of Vermont, which frankly has got many of us turned to 180 trying to understand this. So we appreciate all of these folks coming firsthand tonight, firsthand to give us firsthand info, which we know is careful and important. And then I'll come back to say hello and goodbye again. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth Rathburn, who is representing our town manager's search. Let's do this. We can put you up on the stage if you'd like, give you a microphone.
I'll be down.
Super. All right, so thank you for joining us. I'm going to sit over here. You have the floor.
That's good. I'm Elizabeth Rathburn. I am the vice chair of the Hartford Town Manager Search Committee. I have another member here, Martha McDaniel, who's also on the committee. The Board of Selectmen last summer put together a committee of about 8 people. We started with 9, now we have 8, to look into process and also look for a new town manager for Hartford. Pretty quickly we decided that the best course of action is to hire an executive search firm to assist us and that we can assist them with finding the best candidate. This will cast us the widest net of the most qualified individuals in a pool of managers that is increasingly shrinking. People are just not going into the business of being a town manager. So we want to find the most qualified candidate to come to Hartford set us on the right track. In doing so, we needed to develop a brochure to help advertise the position. We have created a brochure that has pictures of Hartford and the qualifications that we're looking for a new town manager, based on conversations that we've had in town with people and employees and just general feedback that we've heard. There are certain qualifications it's become very clear that people really want a seasoned town manager. We don't want somebody necessarily this is their first job as the town manager. We have a lot of issues going on in town, a lot of things that need to be addressed, and we need a true leader, somebody who has actually done this. And so we've held forums. We held a forum last Wednesday in 3 different locations in town. We have a form F-O-R-M, not forum, a forum on the town website that we've encouraged residents to go online and submit their comments as to what they're looking for in a town manager. Anything from job skills to personality to whatever you might think. There's places to put just generic notes as well. And you can do it anonymously or you can leave your information, and we do respond to every single submission that we are able to through that email website. We've had really productive feedback, and I think that we have a good grasp on what it is the town is looking for in the next town manager. So with that being said, we're continuing to move forward. The job has been posted. What we're looking at for a timeline currently is that the job was posted, I believe, October 17th. We're going to leave the position open for about 6 weeks. At that, and really it's posted for a good solid month. In a month, we're going to really look at what our candidates look like. It is the charge of the select board, from the select board, that the committee come up with a top 5 to present to the select board of the most qualified candidates. And the search committee is working in conjunction with the search firm to have the voice of Hartford be heard. Because an executive search firm based out of Atlanta, Georgia is not necessarily going to understand completely the dynamics of this town. So we as a committee are providing that kind of feedback. So when we get to the point where we're going to start reviewing applications in November, end of November. We hope to have the top 5 by mid-December. The holidays are going to hit. We're going to make it clear that we're looking to actually interview probably at the beginning of January. And they're going to provide us with the top 15 candidates qualified, and then we are going to narrow it down to a top 5 and possibly a top 3 for the select board. The select board is going to choose the next town manager. So our committee is just there to assist and guide this process based on what we're hearing from residents, what their desires are on all aspects of this. So we are going to have conversations with these candidates, and we're going to make it known, these are the things that are important to the residents. So that being said, that's where we're at, and I just want to take a few minutes if you have some comments, and I can certainly tell you where we stand on a few different positions, what we're looking at. I'm here to take some comments from you. Anybody have any thoughts?
I'm just wondering, can you tell us who was on the committee?
Sure. Okay. Now I'm going to test my
If we don't hear something tonight, but we see somebody in the co-op next week.
All right. So Kevin Raleigh, he works at Mascoma Savings Bank. He is our chairman. I'm the vice chair. Martha McDaniel is here. She's also part of our committee. Gabrielle Luck, who's also one of our state reps. Margie Becker, another resident. Chris Hultquist, who is a newer resident. John Clerkin, who's very connected in town. Most people know John.
Kai Cochran.
Kai Cochran. Going through the list. Okay. Kai Cochran. Did I miss anybody, Martha?
I think we got to 8.
That's 8. Okay. That's my memory. Right.
Well, I'm just wondering, as far as when you're saying that you're looking for somebody with experience, do you have something in mind as far as the years of experience that you're looking for, or you're just thinking that I don't want somebody right out of the gate, as long as they've had one job, that's good enough? Or...
Right. Well, one of the things that we kind of put the parameters on, because you had to have something to start with, is 5 to 10 years experience, but we're going to be looking at what that person has been doing in that position, so they're demonstrated experience. Because you can have somebody doing the job for quite a long time and not being very successful in some areas, so we really want to kind of net that out. And it's also going to really depend on what we get for applications. So,
Can you give us a sense of what other things that you already have on the list?
on the list, qualifications, they definitely need to have a good background in understanding municipal finance. And being able to communicate well with residents and being able to explain budget process and, work with the select board, separate out the duties of what the select board's duties are in the town managers, and motivate the community and their boards and commissions, and be very public, be a presence in the community. These are kinds of things you just kind of wrap all around, like this is the kind of town manager that we want. But for the qualifications themselves, definitely they need to have experience in the field of municipal management, and everybody has kind of opinions as to, well, maybe if they have a lot of project management, that needs to be a piece of it. And really, it needs to be somebody who's a jack of all trades. I mean, a manager really needs to understand everything from water reclamation to the police department to the fire department. They need to understand so many things that they don't need to be experts in it, but they need to let their department heads do their job. So again, that is the kind of manager that we're looking for. Luckily, the Mercer Group really understands that, and they also know the best qualified individuals. It's not just a matter of advertising it, they are headhunting. They are calling people saying, you would be great in the town of Hartford, and he has spent some time here so that he understands the dynamics of the 5 villages and the community. So that's kind of where we're starting, and we're gonna take some guidance from him as to the qualifications, because we're just a committee of people from all different backgrounds, and then we're gonna put in our piece of, this person seems like a good fit. So, yes?
Depending on where you stand on the topic, we in the town of Hartford benefit by having Quechee Lakes. Are you looking for a candidate that's used to working with an organization that has either a resort community or a second home community within the town? That's a key factor of having the relationship between the town of Hartford and Quechee Lakes. Quechee Lakes benefits us greatly. We need to have someone that has that experience dealing with that kind of a background.
And we, a few of us from the committee did meet with the Quechee Lakes Landowners Association and got a better understanding of all of the benefits that Quechee Lakes does provide to us. So that is something that even if we find somebody with that dynamic and background, that's great. If we find somebody that doesn't have it but that can understand the relationship and the benefits back and forth and how to work with a community like that, that's good too. I mean, we're really going to pigeonhole ourselves if we say, well, it can't be too old, can't be too young, they have to have this, 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 and this. But it is in our mindset, and we have the feedback from Quechee Lakes to try to incorporate those kind of goals as well.
3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes
You
here?
have 3 minutes to go.
Okay.
I'm curious about, in the conversation that's taken place so far, is the way in which questions around leadership have come forward. And I guess what I mean by that is the ability to kind of bring a community together or behind a common vision or inspire a community to come together in that way. Is that something which is on the front of anybody's mind?
Yes. One of the things that the search committee was tasked with, the select board tasked us with creating a vision for the town. And it became very clear that that was more than just a short conversation, probably a 3-year project. But if somebody from outside came in and had a vision for the town and was able to express that in a way that could motivate not only the select board, but the boards and commissions and the community and move them in a certain direction or try to, whatever that may be, that is at forefront. You need a good leader to do that kind of thing. And I've seen it done in other communities, so I know it can happen here. Anybody else have a thought? I probably have 30 seconds. I appreciate you all coming out and providing some feedback. Again, we do have a form online. You can also reach us. Our contact information is on the website as well, and the town knows how to reach any one of us from our committee. We appreciate any feedback, and as we move through this process, if you have any questions, we're trying to make it very public. Kevin Raleigh does provide an update every week just about, and we have another meeting. All of our meetings are open. We have another meeting on Wednesday night. We meet quite often. It's a little bit of, where do we go from here? But right now, we're just going to be in a holding pattern a little bit and getting additional feedback as we move forward. And then once the applications come in, the real work begins. So, yes, sir.
Real quickly, is there a place on the web where we can see meeting minutes or ideas?
Yes. Yeah, the minutes are being posted, and then Kevin Raleigh does a big synopsis of kind of where we're at. So those updates are on the website. And the website is fantastic if you haven't been on the Newtown website. So, all right, thank you.
That could really be intimidating to see. One of you in this audience said, Scott, when we do this, can we have a big circle? Right, how you set up a meeting and how people feel about the meeting and their interactions is pretty critical. So just so you know, we did think of that for both the presenters and then we talked about having this and so forth. So the coalition is seeking your needs and trying to meet your needs. Without further ado, speaking of new hires, Chief Philip Caston, the stage is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. His name's even up there. That means you are chief. Good.
I'm not going to PowerPoint everybody to death, but I thought it would be really nice to kind of have the ability to make a few points. And I can't sit still. I'm sorry. If you tied me up, I wouldn't be able to speak. Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. And thank you, certainly, Scott and the Hartford Community Coalition, for the opportunity to come out and talk with you tonight about some of the things that are going on with the police department and our work within the town of Hartford and the criminal justice community. As you know, or most of you know, I spoke 2 meetings ago, I believe it was, and when I got the call, I kind of figured it was everybody just wanting to make sure that I was moving along and staying on task. Just kidding. I do have a sense of humor. You have to. You have to. No, this is a tremendous opportunity, and I was very excited to be offered the job of police chief. I think that our town manager search committee is doing a tremendous job. They're focused on what I think are some of the great things that attracted myself and my family to the town. It's a great place to be, and everyone has been so great to me since I've been here. Very welcoming. And that's essentially how I've started out the process with the police department. I really spent my first 6 months on the job, and I'm still doing it. I've got appointments with folks I still haven't met yet all the way through November. So if you want, I have a phone number and email address on here at the end that you can call and I can come meet with you too, or you're always welcome to stop by. But it's been great. Everyone has been very supportive of us, and I'm supported. I have Major Brad Vail here tonight. He's our support manager, also a longtime member of the Community Coalition. We have set out to kind of meet with everyone in the community, let them know that we're willing to partner, find out what resources they have to assist us, find out the work that they're doing in the community, what they see are some of the issues, and what resources the police department has, and how we can join together, share resources, share in our responsibilities to keep the community or improve the health of the community, our livability, our quality of life, and public safety. And that's really the gist of most of my conversations, particularly the first time through. What can we do better? What are we doing well? How can we share? What do you think we need to focus on? Really not a whole lot more than that. And as we've gone through the process each day, I've sat down with our employees as well. Had the opportunity to climb into the front seat of the car with everybody on my staff, spend a couple of hours with them, met with them at various meetings, got their feedback, and we've started a plan. But there were a couple of key things that kind of jumped right out at me. And I probably should introduce myself a little bit. I know I introduced myself at 2 meetings ago, but my experience is from a suburban law enforcement agency, a full-service sheriff's office, where we were responsible for policing, protection of the courts, as well as corrections. So we had about 400 inmates under our roof that fell under our responsibility as well. But the community that I served had 168,000 residents. It was just outside of Baltimore. We were a Baltimore, Washington bedroom community. I bring that up because one of the things that jumped out at me when I came to town was the number of folks that we were coming into contact with on an almost daily, weekly basis that were in some type of crisis. And after spending the last 2 decades in the environment where I came from, coming here, I felt like it was considerably more than what I was accustomed to. And I had a significant amount more resources that we were able to commit to it than what I have here. Our police department at full strength is 23 sworn officers. And I had quite a bit more to apply to that. Very, very important for us to work together. And that is my point. Folks in crisis, being able to address those are partnerships for public safety. We went out and we continue to meet with folks. Because our police officers today, whether it's outside of Baltimore or here in the town of Hartford, and more importantly here in the town of Hartford, we have to be facilitators. We have to bring together people that have the resources, that have the tools, that have the expertise that allow us to do our job. We work collaboratively together. The things that I'm going to talk to you about tonight are what I think are four very big rocks, if you will, that we've focused on very much over the last 8 months. I will be here in just short of the next couple of weeks, 8 months. The Upper Valley Public Health Council has been a tremendous partner to us, as well as some of their partner agencies. The HCRS, I think you've seen our newspaper article recently, some of you that have read the Valley News, about the addition of a police social worker to our staff. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Our partnership with the school district, very, very proud of that, and glad the superintendent and the members of the board are here tonight. And our work with the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. As I mentioned, our partnership with the Upper Valley Public Health Council, we've worked together with them, very concerned. We had a mutual interest, and that was helping folks that were in crisis, connecting people with resources that didn't otherwise have them, and working with the other first responders and public groups that service that population. And we've been able to come together and take advantage of some funding as part of that partnership. And it was actually the Health Council that offered that up with support from some of the local hospitals that will allow us to train our entire staff, both on the police department side and the communications side. I've spoken with the fire chief. I believe that we'll probably have some representatives from fire rescue, as well as our neighboring and allied law enforcement agencies, not only on the Vermont side of Connecticut River, but also New Hampshire, in what is known as the Crisis Intervention Team Concept, or CIT training. Is there anyone that's familiar with the CIT program? It originated in Memphis, and it was based off of some bad interactions or negative interactions between police and someone that was in need of, in crisis and in need of assistance. This has been a groundbreaking training program that's moved throughout the country, and we'll be bringing it here to the Upper Valley. We're fortunate the Lebanon police already have a couple police officers that are trained in this technique, but we will be working with them to train all of our staff. Some of the key components of that: some mental health diagnosis, psychiatric medications and what some of the effects are, the issues of drug abuse and dependence, cross-cultural sensitivity and empathy, as well as verbal de-escalation skills and how they mix with officer safety. These are issues that are going on across the country, and the town of Hartford is no different. As I said, one of the very first things that jumped out at me was the number of folks that are in crisis that we were dealing with. Because oftentimes the police, we're the last call. We're the call that gets made when mom and dad, or son and daughter, or aunt and uncle, they have no one else to turn to. The doctor's office is closed, they don't have access to resources, and they call on the police because they feel like it's come to a point that it's beyond their control. There's no one else to call. This is very important training. It's a 40-hour block of instruction, and we could not do that without the help and support of the Upper Valley Public Health Council. I'm very grateful to have that. Are there any questions about anything as we've gone on so far? I know listening to me talk's like drinking out of a fire hose. The next piece is our partnership with Healthcare and Rehabilitation Services, or HCRS, our police social worker. Very, very grateful for this partnership. This comes at no cost to our residents. It's through a grant program passed through from the state through Healthcare and Rehabilitation Services of Southeastern Vermont. They have been working with us for the last couple of months now to help identify someone that has the right strengths, qualities, and characteristics that would be able to come in and bed with the police department and serve as a mental health, or what we call police social worker, to help us with the de-escalation process, do some case management from the police department. They'll actually get right in with the patrol officers, work from the police department, and help do some of the case management from there, as well as going out proactively and identifying some of the folks that are not receiving care or services but that we might come into contact with and might need some of those services. It allows us to deal with our needs on a real-time basis. Right now, we often have to do that by making phone calls, getting people to come out after hours. This is someone that will work with us. They're an employee of HCRS, but 40 hours a week they're assigned to the police department. They'll work hand in hand with our patrol officers and help facilitate the access to those services for our residents, help de-escalate situations that may get beyond the control of our police officers, and help us connect those folks with the services that they need. It's a tremendous program. It's been gaining ground around the country, and we're very thankful to have the opportunity to bring that here to our town. Are there any questions about that?
Is that the core of the Rutland program? The social worker?
They do have, the town of Rutland, Bellows Falls, and Springfield all have mental health social workers. I believe Windsor has one part-time. But there are a number of other things that Rutland is doing, as well as some other folks. But this is the core, certainly, of how we would work with folks that are in crisis or suffering a crisis that is substance abuse caused. Yes, ma'am.
You said 40 hours a week. Is that flexible? Because many times crises occur after 4:30.
Yes, and I don't want to let a whole lot out. We have the employee that we had certainly selected. I know there'll come a point where we're able to introduce her to the community, and I don't want to take a whole lot away from her. But she's been embedded with the police department outside of suburban Chicago, or outside of Chicago, for the last 2.5 years. And she is very excited about blending in with the patrol forces. She's accustomed to doing that, and brings a number of skill sets that are rotational. I know that early on we'll probably see that employee on a very regimented schedule while they get their case schedules set and get an understanding of what they have on their plate at the outset, get introduced to folks. But I think you'll see this employee will be out, about, and around at varying times.
When does this employee start?
We're expected to have her on board by the end of the first week of November, beginning of the second week. So it's my understanding she'll be starting with HCRS that first week of November. When she actually gets to us, it'll be a couple days in there. Yes, sir.
Thank you. This is exponentially terrific news for our community. This is just great. Phil, will the also be elevated relationships between our police force and crisis folks at HCRS Crisis that are 24/7 and so forth? Do you already have that relationship established?
Yes, and it's a good opportunity for me to make a point. I've been extremely impressed with the work of our staff. They do an awful lot that just, to them, it is, it's part of every day what they do. Talking folks out of crisis, talking folks out of harming themselves. And I'm certainly not unaccustomed to seeing heroic and good acts by law enforcement officers, having been around the profession in the time that I have. But I've been very, very impressed with the amount of ownership, the sense of responsibility, and the empathy that our patrol officers have taken with a number of families in town that have had crises going on. The individuals that they've come into contact with, that they've taken the extra time to connect them with someone. These are all time-consuming things. It's not something that you can show up, deal with abruptly, and walk away from and take the next call. They take time. And our folks are often staying beyond the hours that they work. They're following up with people when they're not working. It is a small town. There's few places that you can go here where folks don't know who you are. But they're very good about that, and I am impressed with that. We've had a good relationship with HCRS, and I think this is certainly credit the staff that's there with that relationship up to this point, and I think that's why they were willing to move quickly to do that. Good. The next piece, and I think that this goes hand in hand with it, I'm very proud, glad the superintendent, my good friend the superintendent is here tonight. We spent a lot of time together this summer, and actually met with the superintendent my first day in town. And I was grateful that he gave me the opportunity to come and speak with him. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I know that the schools are the center of our town. And my wife and I, we've sat on the cold bleachers on Friday night, and we know that our schools are the center of town, and we're very proud of that. The schools provide us a couple of unique opportunities as law enforcement officers, and it's so very important for us to work and have a solid relationship with the schools for a number of reasons. So it was a priority when I came into town that we had a partnership as opposed to just a relationship with the schools. And the superintendent was very excited about that. We worked over the last several months to put this together. And what we've come out with is we call the School Resource Officer Partnership. Is how many of you are familiar, and the school folks not included, with the program that we had in prior school years? We had one police officer that was split between the middle school and the high school. And while they could go and assist with the 3 elementary schools or the programmatic schools, like the Tech Center, the Wilder School, they were typically bounced back and forth between those 2 schools. And it was one police officer. They reported to the school. They were somewhat removed from the police department. While the police department could be there to assist them, there was a little bit of a gap, and we wanted to close that up. My personal opinion, the health and safety of our students is everyone's responsibility. Not just the parents, not just the teachers and the superintendent. He and his staff take it very seriously, but also every one of my police officers, and they were ready for that. They knew something needed to be done. Every single police officer, when I got in the front seat of the car with them, they said, we've got to fix this. It needs to be better. We need to do something different. We need to be in the schools. And what we ended up with was a 2-pronged approach. The first piece that we have kicked off with the start of this school year, and we were able to do, fortunately, with the help of our employees and an adjustment in the schedule. I believe you may have seen some of that reported in the news recently. I spoke at one of the select board meetings the superintendent and I did, was our Adopt a School program. And essentially what we did at the main schools, we've taken 2 patrol officers and assigned them to every single school. And they adopt that school. It is their building, it's their facility, it's their responsibility to meet with the principal, the teachers, the students, their staff, understand the schedule, know the events that are going on. It's part of their beat, it's part of their patrol area, and it comes from what we call beat accountability. They own it, it's theirs. I'm not going to tell them how to do it, other than I gave our folks 3 primary goals. We're going to build relationships, we're going to be visible, and we're going to be accessible and helpful as we go through that process. That's what we're trying to do. We're there to augment the principal and their staff, assist them in the work that they're doing in the school, because it's hard work. I've got 4 kids, I know. I don't know how my wife does it. I don't do it. She does a good job, but I understand. No, and all of you that have children, you know it's not an easy job. And we expect our teachers and the principals to carry those same sense of values that we're trying to bring to our kids at home and carry them on in the school. They need some backup, and our officers are there to do that. They're there to assist them, to be part of that, to build relationships with the students, and it's paying dividends already. We're finding that. We're getting connected with kids whose families need services. We've had a couple of investigations that the relationships have paid off because we've received information. And when you build trust and you earn trust, it comes back tenfold. And that's been the first focus. Our folks are having a great time. They've been invited in to play cards. No gambling, math facts. I think some of them have had lunch. We've already been there in the past on certain limited things, but this is the 2 measurables that I've given them. 1 foot patrol in the building per week and 1 campus patrol per day. The two police, they separate each other, or the two patrol officers, they separate. One's up on our night shift and one's down on the day shift. So there's always somebody working. So if we have a football game, anybody been to a football game lately? The Hurricanes are doing good, aren't they? You've probably seen some of our patrol officers there after school. I know we had one make a concert at the White River School. It's very important that the kids see that they have support, the parents know that we're there, and we get contacted, and they talk with us, and we're able to make connections as we do that. So it's not just during the school day, it's also after hours. I don't tell them when to go, I don't tell them how to go, other than those first three things I told you about, building those relationships. That's how they're doing it, and they're free to decide, and they move it around. It adds a random element to how we're doing it. Folks don't know when we're coming. The kids don't know when we're coming. And we check in, we let the principal and or the folks in the front office know we're there, and we spend a little time. The second piece of that is we're in the midpoint in building that. We've always had a good relationship. The schools have always had a good relationship in bringing information together. But the lessons that we teach the kids, and not just the lessons that we teach the kids, but what we take out into the community at meetings like this to give to parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents, or when we meet with the civic groups, are very, very important. And bringing the folks that have an expertise, the knowledge, and understanding of what's going on together so that we can collaborate, talk about it, share ideas, share issues, and then get the subject matter experts in front of the kids, there to talk to the parents, there to answer questions, is what the second piece is about, and that's the instructional component. Traditional school programs have had the police officer, or that have involved school resource officers, had them teaching things that sometimes were a little bit beyond what their role of expertise was. And the good SROs would bring somebody in to help them. They'd go get that extra help. You're pinched, you don't necessarily do it. It sometimes doesn't happen. The important thing, and I can see some of our partners around the room here, the State's Attorney's Office, our Special Investigations Unit, Valley Court Diversion, the Restorative Justice Center, Second Growth, our Women's Information Service, Healthcare and Rehabilitative Services, and our Department for Children and Families, all joined us in this agreement. So that when we get to the instructional component and we bring these folks together, we have the best information, the greatest amount of resources, and the appropriate people so that we can enhance the lesson content and not just get it to the kids in the classroom, but it's also that our police officers and specialists who will teach or present can take that back to parents and other community members. So it keeps the school at the center of the community, and it keeps the message at the center of the community. Very, very proud of that. Did I get that? The one thing, and thank you, good job to you as well. The superintendent, on one of our last couple of meetings, we were getting together, and we had met with the Restorative Justice Center, and we were talking about discipline and how we would work things. And we went to the folks at the Restorative Justice Center and Valley Court Diversion, and it's how do we get this restorative justice concept and get it into the process at the schools. So we were very excited to expand what was originally just a law enforcement type component with the state's attorney and the investigators to bring in the justice component to it. We're very excited. We're going to have a get-together here before the holidays and get everybody to start talking about it. I know as we go through this year, we'll be testing a couple different things, and the teaching component and the justice component as we move into next school year will just blossom. So very, very excited about this, very grateful for the superintendent and his partnership, and certainly all of the principals and teachers. It's been a tremendous opportunity, and definitely proud of our staff as we go through. Are there any questions about that? Wow.
I'm sorry, I actually went. Does the school and the police department have a memorandum of understanding?
We do.
Cool.
We do.
Good to know.
It's actually a formal agreement that we put together. The original agreement that was set up was really a financial agreement. And it was more of a business relationship. And this is, as the superintendent and I talked, we wanted a partnership. And we talked. We talked on Sunday, as a matter of fact. We are in constant communication. I couldn't ask for a better partner. And I know, as I said, the principals are great. I've got a child at each level in the schools. I know my wife is happy, and that's the most important thing for me. But we have one in elementary school, one in the middle school, and one in high school. Very, very pleased with the interaction. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes.
Within the budget for the school, there was, for the town, there was funds allocated for a school resource officer. I assume those funds are now being used for the crisis mental health worker. Now that there's been, where have those funds gone now that there's not a school resource officer?
Well, there still is a school resource officer, and the financial agreement is still in place. The difference is we've spread that out over all of the schools, whereas it was focused originally in just the two main schools. So the financial agreement is still in place. We're honoring the original agreement and seeing where this program, process, and partnership goes this year. The mental health or police social worker is being funded through an Act 79 grant through the state of Vermont. That's not local monies, it's pass-through monies from the state that will be managed by HCRS.
5 minutes, Chief.
My question was about the crisis intervention piece of it. Is anybody on that team equipped with Narcan? Is that being used?
Right now, there's no police officers are equipped with Narcan. I'm not opposed to that. However, there was a study that was done that involved all of the public safety departments in town prior to my arrival. It was my understanding that our paramedics have such an impressive response time, a couple of them are here in the room, that there was not a need to do that in the immediate sense. I am comfortable with that, I'm accustomed to it, but at this point, as everyone sat down and looked at that process, it was working with our paramedics. Any more questions? Okay, the final piece, and what we've done is I talked to you about these three things that I felt like were just immediate pressing needs, and I feel like we're well on our way to addressing that. We have a couple more things to come. There's a few I haven't, let out of the barn yet, so to speak. But probably the most important thing for us right now is we're looking internally. We're looking at ourselves. I told you I spoke with all of my staff, and they said we really need to tighten things up, Chief. We want to be the best. We want to be the best. We want to be respected to be the best, like we are the best, have the best, most modern, up-to-date practices. And as a result of that, we are participating in the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, Voluntary Law Enforcement, and Communications Accrediting Process. These are the best practices in law enforcement, public safety. They're put together and updated on a frequent basis. We're fortunate, and one of the things that attracted me to the town of Hartford is that every department in town government is accredited, except our police and communications departments. I know of very few like that throughout the country, and I've been an assessor with CALEA since 2009. I've traveled the nation, I've seen a number of communities. You live in a great community, the government that has made a significant investment in providing you with the very best services. And our folks in the police department wanted to make sure that they were doing the same for you as well. So we're looking at our policies, our procedures, our programs, and we're bringing them into compliance with the best practices. And that includes addressing our authority, role, responsibilities, the organization. We've gone through a slight internal restructure, how we administer our personnel and our processes. Very grateful to have been able to come to an agreement with our bargaining unit. That had been out for some time prior to me coming on board, and we benefited with a great schedule that's put more folks on the street as a result of that normal rotation. Addresses how we handle arrestees and our detention processes. as well as our support and technical process. Criminal investigations, traffic enforcement, soup to nuts, it's a management model and aligned with what the best modern practices are. So our folks wanted to do that, and we're working night and day. I've got a stack of new directives on my desk like that I'm reviewing right now. So very proud of them as we move forward, and we'll certainly look for your input as we go through. The community interaction piece is a cornerstone of that process. With that, I think I'm getting real close to the end, and just wanted to answer any questions that you had.
I have one question. You said
Yes.
that the position of the social worker will be paid by Act 79. Is that 1 year, 2 years? How long does that go? And has there been any talk as to how that will be funded thereon after? You know, town
Right.
budget, school budget, half and half?
No, the monies for the mental health social worker come from a state level grant. It'll be competitive year to year. It's based on need in the community. And right now, there are 2 communities that don't have near the number of interactions as our personnel are having, and have near the caseload that our community has. And they have had a mental health social worker for a couple of years now. I'm very confident that once we bring this process in place, not only will it be something that will be supported at least over the next couple of years, I'm very confident that we will become a model for the Upper Valley and the rest of the state. Any other questions at all? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Right now, my contact information. If you have questions, you need anything, concerned about something we're doing, or feel like there's something we're not doing, you can reach me at that email address or the phone number. Please give me a call. Thank you.
We're going to let the select board and the school board arm wrestle for a minute. And while they're doing that, I would invite you to grab, seriously, grab a water, grab a cider, grab a little bite. Everybody should stand up. You should stand. We have about 50 more minutes left to go in this exciting evening. You don't want to miss this front row wrestling, arm wrestling match. Like grab a bite, that'd be great. There's always a danger whenever you let the crowd loose in between that some of them come back and some of them don't. So we did pretty well. If you look around and your neighbor's not there, just take good notes and call them later with a text. During our transition, I'm just going to make a couple of announcements if I could. I was told, speaking of spouses, or affiliates, I was told by mine, make sure I do these 2 things. So one of them is, and we have this on the HCC Facebook and the website and so forth. Again, part of HCC's effort is to get the word out to any number of opportunities of support around the Upper Valley. This is one of them. Family workshop at Headrest for families affected by substance use disorders. Narcan training, if not Narcan, but Narcolepsy training and medication will be available and so forth. This is great. This is training for families who are trying to, specifically by Headrest at Headrest, on November the 10th. There's a flyer out front. This is not new probably to a lot of people in here because we have had it online and we intend to keep doing so. Also, I wanted to introduce Laura Simon and Matt Osborne. Are you folks still here? Great. So Laura and Matt this is a little public relations piece with one more. There's lots of folks, as you know, if you've been coming to these meetings, what we try to do is introduce folks in our area that provide services. So if the 2 of you could, if you have the floor.
Hey, I'm Laura Simon. I live in Wilder, Vermont. And Matt, and we have one other person from our committee, right back there, John. And we are the Community Resilience Organization of Hartford. We're a group of residents, organizations, and town staff. Matt's with the planning board here at our planning department. And our purpose is to, I'm going to read my notes if you don't mind. We're strengthen Hartford's ability to deal with natural and man-made disasters. We're one of 6 prototype towns in the state. Let's see. I guess what we're looking at is resilience is the ability for a town to come together to solve problems. We're thinking about what Hartford faced with the example of Irene. It's the 4th year anniversary of Irene. We have these idea boards that we've put in libraries. It's right behind you. And if you would like to leave a comment before you leave, we are putting them up as much as we can in places where you can get at them, the town hall. And our question for your input at this point is, it's the 4th anniversary of Irene. What have we learned? And any input you have for if we have to face this again.
And we'll have a new question every month, and we have them at the different libraries around town, the town hall, the town website. And at this point, we're trying to get the word out about our new committee. It's brand new this year. And then we also have Scott Cooney, who's the interim emergency services manager. He's on the committee. Lori Hirschfield, the Department of Planning and Development Services Director, is on it. Ty Cochran, and Dylan Priest is the chairman of the committee. And we're also trying to look at other organizations to partner with. So thank you for having this opportunity to tell you a little bit about our committee and the work that we're trying to do.
And we'll leave this paper that says what we just said over here.
Okay, wonderful. So without further ado, if we may, we'll introduce our Hartford School Board members and give us a little bit of an update there. That would be terrific. Thank you very much. Peter Merrill.
So I'm Peter Merrill. I'm a member of the school board. I was asked to talk a little bit about Act 46. Quite frankly, after following the chief, I feel a little bit like that husband and wife comedy team who had the misfortune of following the Beagles on the Ed Sullivan Show and promptly disappeared into complete anonymity. So I spent Thursday and Friday of last week at the Vermont School Boards Association, and the subject of most of that conversation that took place at that two-day meeting was Act 46, which is the state's attempt to try to deal with reorganizing education in Vermont. My reaction coming out of that meeting is best reflected by that. Was Act 46 a kick in the pants to get us going or a kick in the head to keep us down? I'm not sure which. It was an interesting conversation for a lot of reasons. So those of you who attended the town meeting last year may remember the presentation I did on the school board budget. This was the very last slide of that presentation, which asked the town if we could afford the money that we were asking you to cough up to pay for the education program this year. Well, that's the same question that the members of the state legislature have been trying to answer themselves with respect to the entire state. This is a graph. Oh boy, that's not showing up terribly well. There was actually supposed to be a header on that. Doesn't seem to be that. This is a graph showing the trends in student enrollment in red and education spending in green over the last 10-year period for which we have any statistics. It's 2004 to 2014. In that period of time, the number of students in the educational programs in this state went down by 10%. The cost of education went up by 38%. Doesn't take a whole lot of thinking to realize that those trends really aren't very sustainable. You can't keep on increasing the cost higher and higher, and particularly it doesn't make sense in many people's minds if you got fewer and fewer people that you're teaching. So they tried to figure out what they could do about that. Their idea was consolidation. Basically, they want fewer and larger school districts. Their idea is that small school districts are not very efficient. Education is entirely a numbers game. The more students you have in a district, the cheaper the cost is per student, because you only need one superintendent and a few principals and a couple of schools. And if you have a whole bunch of students that are carrying the cost of all of that, it's not too bad, but if you only got a few, it gets very expensive very quickly. And so they passed this thing which says that they're going to have sustainable governance structures that provide pre-K through 12 education at a reasonable cost throughout the state. And what do they mean by sustainable governance structure? Well, what they really are saying is that all the school districts in the state need to reorganize so that at the end of the process, each of the remaining school districts has certain characteristics. It's got to be a single district that does pre-K through 12. It has to serve at least 900 students. This is the getting bigger part of it. And it has to have one of the four most common structures, which are various combinations of running schools and tuitioning out students. Now, they chose the four most common. I was told by Coach Christie, who worked on this, that there are actually something like 15 different structures for schools and school districts. And by the way, when we're talking about consolidating, one of the reasons you might want to be, things you might want to be aware of, is there's something on the order of 350 school districts in this state. Considering that the population is in the 600,000 range, that's an astounding number of school districts. So there are three paths that you're supposed to get to. I'm not going to talk about these in any great detail. If you have questions later, I can go into the detail. But basically, there's an accelerated path which only applies to supervisory unions, which is a school district where you've got one central high school and a bunch of sending towns, and they all send them, and they're all under the single administration, but they each have separate school districts for each of the sub-schools, which are consolidating into a single instance. And they get some fairly nice financial benefits if they consolidate, but they have to do it really quickly. Then there's a voluntary transition to a sustainable governance structure. And then there's what's referred to nicely as the self-assessment, quality review, and statewide plan, which basically means if you don't do it, we'll do it for you. So, now that we understand what they want, the gotchas. And by the way, those of you who are paying attention and are particularly well informed about the world of education may realize that the qualified governance plans that they will accept, this district already qualifies. We don't actually have to do anything. We're there, we've met the limit, we've got a pre-K through 12, we've got well over 900 students, we meet one of the four things, so we could, theoretically at least, sit there and do nothing. But that would be a really, really bad thing if we did that, and this is why, the gotchas. Okay, those of you who've been paying attention to the Valley News recently have seen a number of stories about school choice, particularly relevant to the town just to our south, Heartland, because they're a school choice town. And basically what the rule says is the school board, the Department of Education ruling was that whatever you do for one of the students in the district, you got to do for all of them. So if you're trying to consolidate a district and make sure that all of your students go to your high school, you can't offer school choice unless you also offer it to everybody else. And that sort of gets in the way of the, hey, by the way, you're all going to my high school kind of thing. So as a result of that, you get these large fights over school choice. Do we have it? Don't we have it? The other issue that you need to be aware of in this form of a gotcha is the allowable increase limit language they put in Act 46. This is a restriction on how much we can increase the price of education, or how much we can increase the spending of education, I should say, which everybody in theory should really be for. I mean, we want to keep the cost down. We don't want to have, right? But unfortunately, the way it works really is a bit of a trap. So this is a variable limit on how much a school can increase its spending over the next 2 years. And it's basically done if you are really greedy and you've been spending a lot, well, you can't increase it much. And if you've been really, really careful with your money, you got more room to increase it. And so the more expensive school districts can't spend as much per student, and the more careful districts can spend more. At Hartford, we're just about in the middle of the pack, and it comes out to about $244 per student that we can increase the spending this year from last year, or I should say for the next coming school budget from this one. which means that in total, we can't increase spending per student above $15,102 without getting double taxed. And the example at the bottom of the screen, which you probably can't read, if we were to increase the spending, for instance, to $1,600 per student, then the taxes that we would actually have to raise would be $16,898, because that's the difference between the cap amount and the amount that we actually spend. So each time we go over that cap, we have to actually pay for it twice. By the way, the preliminary budgets that we are developing, without doing any changes, without trying to get real fancy about anything, are already over that cap. So we've got some real work to do on the school board already to try to keep costs within that range. So how does this work against us, and why does it force us to want to think quite seriously about consolidation with another district? Well, this is the worst case scenario. It's only the worst case, and it would never actually happen this way, but because school funding is really, really difficult to figure out because there's so many factors that come in, it actually takes our director of finance weeks and weeks and weeks to figure out what happens with very small changes. So Hartford has approximately 84 tuition students who come from other towns, and they pay somewhere in the order of $1.3 million that other towns do to have their students come here and attend our schools. If those students are no longer coming here, that means, assuming that we don't change the budget, we got to pay for $1.3 million more of budget. And by the way, I say assuming no other budget changes for a reason, because it's not an easy step function. Gee, we lost 10 students, we can cut one teacher, we'll save that money, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't really work that way. And so how much you can cut depends on a whole lot of factors beyond what happens with the number of students. It's not a direct one-to-one correlation. So, but just assuming that we keep the budget flat to make this easy to understand, when the student number in the town drops from slightly over 1,500 down 84 students to 14-something, the cost per student automatically goes up even though we haven't spent a penny more. So that means a double whammy. We get hit with the increase per student spending, and we get hit by the fact that we now got to pay for more of the overall cost of running the district because other towns aren't chipping in to help. And a real rough back-of-the-envelope conversation, calculations that I did and then ran by our director of budget was that that particular combination of scenarios would result in something like a 24% tax increase with not much improvement for our students, just keeping things basically the same way that they are right now, with all the courses and so forth that we want to provide them. So we have an incentive to get in this game to try to figure out how we can join with other local districts to make sure that we're going to get the students. This is sort of why we want to think about it. So when we think about it, we got lots of things to think about. So who might we partner with? What else do we need to do to understand what's going on? How do we even start to begin to talk to these different school districts? None of which is real easy, because if you thought about it, you know, you go over to your friends and you say, hey, how about joining on our team? Well, that's difficult enough when you're playing baseball in elementary school. It gets really difficult when you're talking about having splits between who you affiliate with and so forth. So these are difficult conversations to initiate, and they're even more difficult to go on along with. So that's sort of a quick interview. Now this gets back to the, is it a kick in the head or is it a kick in the pants? And I'm actually slightly optimistic about this one. Because I think we might actually improve educational quality through consolidation, and it might allow us to solve other problems. For example, this is a hypothetical, this is not a go tell everybody in the world we're about to do this. because I made this up. But if we were to say to join up with Windsor, Windsor's got a very nice high school. And, you know, they got lots of nice teachers who are well educated. And we could do something interesting in terms of, say, setting up a magnet school to do arts and performing arts and things like that, music in Windsor, because they got a great auditorium. And it's actually a pretty big school. And we, at the moment, have several programs that cater to kids with special needs, autism programs and things like that, which are located in, quite frankly, some really crummy buildings and spaces at the moment. We can go into why they're crummy spaces and buildings. It has to do with the way the state allows you to pay for that. But they're buildings that, if we're going to fix up, it's going to take an awful lot of money to fix up. Well, we could move those programs down to Windsor, where they got plenty of space that wasn't being used under this scenario. We could close down those buildings and spaces here where the programs are, sell them off, repurpose them, whatever, and we could actually come up with a solution to some combination problems we have. There's an old saying that if you got one problem, you got a problem. If you got two problems, you might actually come up with a solution because they can actually sometimes cancel each other out. So if you think about this, hypothetically, this could turn out to be a kick in the pants that gets us going in the right direction to try to deal with some of the issues we have in terms of how do we pay for education, how do we provide the broadest kinds of education that meet the varying needs of all of our students, how do we do it as efficiently as possible? But whether it turns out to be this or not, at this point it's too early to tell. Thank you. So if you got any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Is the school board talking about talking to other districts?
We certainly are. There is a subcommittee of the school board, including myself and Coach Christie and the superintendent, which is in place at the moment. It's not an official Act 46 study committee, because that means something very special, but it is a committee that's exploring what Act 46 means. We have a small amount of money which we're allowed to spend to bring in some consultants to help us walk down this path, and we are actually talking about it. We've also been having various sort of quiet conversations with our neighbors about what they might be interested in. That.
So have you talked to David Baker, the superintendent of Windsor? Because it's kind of interesting, your hypothetical thing, he's kind of interested in it.
Well, I'm sure he would be. And I have not, in fact, talked to Mr. Baker. There are, as I said, some quiet conversations going back. I will say that, though, at the recent school board association meeting, which we had last week, I dropped this hypothetical on the head of the Windsor School Board. But this is entirely hypothetical, and whether or not this is a way we would want to go or not, we don't know enough to know yet. You got to look at all sorts of things about number of students, expenses, transportation times. The one advantage that we have is that we're right on the interstate. So if we go north and south on the interstate, we actually have fairly easy transportation times for a much larger section of the state than you would think. And I guess it wouldn't say anything, letting the cat too much out of the bag, if I said that my personal dream is to create an Upper Valley school district that goes as far north as we could and as far south as we could, tying everything together, trying to get as large a population as we can to try to get as many resources together under the same group and have a single school board over it. Because if you've ever looked at what happens in some of these supervisory unions where you got 13 different schools, each with their own school district and all reporting to, it's just a nightmare. Yes, ma'am.
So Act 46 creates an incentive for Vermont schools to work together.
Right.
But is there any reason that, is it to the advantage of Hartford to consider interstate?
So that's a very interesting question. You may be aware that the town just to our north has an interstate arrangement. There are 2 interstate school districts in the entire United States. Both of them are on the border between New Hampshire and Vermont. They took an act of Congress to create. So they're not simple things. They're not going to happen easily. But theoretically, if Norwich was wanting to talk to us and that brought in Hanover, I guess you could get in interstate. We actually do, by the way, get students from the other side of the river right now. Most of them attend the technical center. But we're open to all sorts of conversations to see what we can make work and what the lawyers will let us get away with. Anybody else? That's it? Wow. Well, thank you very much for listening to me.
Any other announcements while we're waiting for our friends from the select board to prepare? Hearing none? I'm sure you are. Fantastic. So Rebecca White and Simon Dennis from our school board, from our select board, sorry. Well, yeah, we're all family.
Becca, you go ahead and start us off here.
So, as introduced, my name is Becca and this is Simon. We're 2 of the 7 select board members for the town of Hartford. And when we were approached by the HCC, we thought that the best direction to take our presentation was really looking at what types of services you get as a taxpayer and as a citizen of the town of Hartford from the town, and what do you actually pay for. And we're at a pretty big crossroads as a community about what direction we want to see either our services and the amount of money that we allot to those services, where we want to see those actually go. So to start off with, we want to be really clear that the town budget is actually only a third of the total tax bill that you get. So we only represent, the school budget is the other portion of that. So just so you know, when you get your tax bill, a third of it is represented by the town versus the other 2/3 represented by the school. And we broke it down, you can't really see the percentages, but we broke it down by department, as well as capital improvements and some miscellaneous. So that's really what you see when you get your tax bill. So I did a little bit of research. Oh yeah.
Go back to that just one more minute.
Yeah. And if you would like a copy of this slide, or you would like a copy of any of this information, I would happily provide that to you.
We're going to go over the departments in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So just so you know, each one of those departments, we're going to explain what services they have and how much it costs you. So quickly, I did a little bit of research on how much you pay in taxes based on a home value of $200,000. The mean home value in Hartford, taking out some very extreme factors on either side, is the bottom number right there. So our town total budget is actually 15 million. That very large number at the top. The second number is actually somewhere in that range of $10 to $12 million. So I didn't actually have the exact number, and I'll have to find it for you in the town report, but the actual town rate based on that, the tax rate, is 90 cents for every $100 of property value. So you might hear when we have budget season, like a penny on the dollar for this amount of money. To give you an example, the per household cost is about $1,800 based on that home value. So I like to think of my budget on a month-to-month level, so I thought that that would be the best way to break it down for folks to understand contextually how much are you paying to live in Hartford and get the services based on that amount of money. So the per household breakdown is about $150 a month. Thank you, Simon. And I thought, well, what the heck do I actually pay $150 for in my life normally, to give us some context? And I actually used my AT&T mobile plan for you, which if I had one line, it would be $155, but I have a smartphone, so it is $215 a month for my AT&T service. And then I thought, as you can see, the cost of Comcast is a little bit lower, but that's only for the first 12 months. In Hartford, you don't get a big increase in taxes after the second year you live here. Luckily, it's not an elevator payment. And then I thought I'd throw in for a little bit of humor, what does it cost Angelina Jolie to have a private security guard? You might be seeing some similarities to the cost of maybe a security force elsewhere in our community, but she pays $2,225 a month for one person to make sure that she's safe. And the next slide is Simon.
Okay, taking over here, we thought that if we distributed, went back and forth, that might demonstrate some board collaboration. Getting away from the history of conflict on the board. But anyway, you can, roughly speaking, you could say we've got 8 departments in the town, and just in general, we'll just run through this. This is the, we're going to go through the one by one. We have public safety, we have public works, and parks and recreation, planning and development. Those are really the big 4, with capital improvements coming right up as a, could be considered a fifth department. So if you look at it there, so the public safety is almost half the budget, and public works, managing a road system, which is the longest of any town in the state of Vermont, coming up right behind there, and then the capital improvements in third place, followed up just behind that by general government or the administration. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these departments now one by one and talk about it from the standpoint of what are you getting for your tax dollars. And part of the reason, part of the value of this kind of reframing, not so much what are we spending it on, but thinking about what are we getting in terms of services for the money that we spend, may be a new kind of framework for us to evaluate where we can conserve based on what services we're willing to let go of. So we'll get into more detail about that in just a moment.
Okay, so I had Public Works, which if you don't know anything about Hartford, as Simon mentioned, one of our almost Guinness World Records facts in Vermont is we have the most road miles of any town in Vermont. And our Public Works department is first a highway department, meaning that they take care of the roads, and then the 3 other parts are water, wastewater, and solid waste. So I'm not going to be talking about water, the last 3, because those are paid through a separate pot of money, meaning that your tax dollars, those $150 that you pay a month, don't actually fund those 3 things. But what do they actually fund? So I met with Rich Menge, who is our department head of Public Works, and they do a lot. We have just about 1,400 culverts in Hartford, which means that our roads don't get flooded over when we have too much rain. And I like to go through kind of what they do each season, and I have a little picture of them cleaning up a road. Because one of the important facts about Public Works is they're not just plowing the roads. They're making sure that the roads are safe and that we're able to travel on them at all times of the year. So one fact that Rich mentioned to me was when he first started, we had 30% functioning up to standard roads, meaning that you could drive on them and the state counted them as good to go. We now have about 80% since his time here. That means that we've done a huge job to increase how well our roads can be driven, as well as just making sure that we're safe. And another part with the highway is it's not just roads, it's also sidewalks. So, next up, Simon.
Next slide we're going to talk about is planning and development. The planning development staff is responsible, obviously, for carrying out the planning of the development in the town, but not only doing the planning, but also executing it. So many of the documents that are being produced, like the hazard mitigation plan, is a document that department is responsible not only for creating, but also implementing, and making sure that that what's created in that actually goes into effect. Likewise, to some extent, many of our core documents in the town, and this includes things like our master plan for one, but also the flood regs and the zoning regs, the subdivision regs. These are all things that are part of the work purview of the planning and zoning, planning and development department. Grant writing. Interesting to learn that this department has won over $4.7 million in grants over the past 5 years, which has gone directly into projects that are taking place in Hartford. Pretty surprisingly large number. And then, of course, there's the business of issuing permits. So this includes your zoning permits, your flood regulation permits, certificate of occupancy permits, subdivision permits, and all of that involves a lot of citizen interface with walking people through this process and helping people move through it. I'm going to keep moving here briskly along here so we don't get bogged down. The next department we're going to discuss is public safety.
Great, so I had the other very large department, which is public safety, and that accounts for 3 different organizations within our community. The first one is the fire department, the second is police, and the last one, which I knew very little about, is our emergency communication center. So to focus on what those services are that we get from public safety, I think the most important number to know is that 90% of emergency calls have a vehicle on site within 8 minutes. That means if you pick up the phone and you call, someone will be there at 90% of the time at your door in 8 minutes. That is incredible. The fact of the matter is that we have the lowest cost professional fire department of the 3 large communities that have professional fire departments in the Upper Valley. So you might be thinking, well, doesn't everyone have a 90% rate within 90% of calls within 8 minutes? That's where they're getting people. But we actually have a really stellar group of people that are working exceptionally hard. So I took some time to speak with both Steve Locke, who is our interim town manager, as well as our fire chief at some point, at some level, as well as our chief of police. And I think the biggest thing to take away is that as a community, how we value safety and the type of services that we get from our public safety officers is in how likely I think someone feels comfortable in their community. Meaning there is some economic reciprocation to how safe you feel. If you feel safe and you can talk to your neighbors, you might go out at night, you might go to a store, you might do things with your children outdoors and not stay in your home and feel unsafe. So I think the value is not necessarily as easy to pick up as we might think, because we do generally think of ourselves as a safe community, as one that people want to live in and people feel comfortable going out at night in. So even I wanted to just list the numbers a little bit because it's a relatively equal breakdown between fire and police. But fire also accounts for ambulance services. So go ahead, Simon.
So one department that might jump out at us as providing citizen value right off the bat is Parks and Recreation, and the work of this department pretty much could be broken into 3 categories. One of which is to manage the 14 parks and the 3 facilities. By the way, I'm seeing Tad here in the audience. Tad and I discussed this not too long ago. I'm glad to see you here. And that's a year-round maintenance project, and that's also very technically involved from a number of different angles. And then there's also the programs that everyone is familiar with, including concert series, 4th of July, this type of thing. And then a big piece, a surprisingly big piece of the Parks and Recreation budget goes into administering youth programs. $210,000 of the budget goes right into youth programs, and an additional approximately $55,000 going into the swimming program, and a wide range of workshops that are going on throughout the town. Any word from you, Tad?
You are nationally accredited as well.
Becca's going to pick up with the libraries.
Yeah, so we have 4 libraries in our community and 1 senior center. And I think it's important to note that with all of these community spaces, they are funded in part by the town, as well as the senior center. One note that I added to this slide, but doesn't necessarily relate, is the fact that we as a community actually give to a lot of nonprofit organizations. Sometimes you might see on your ballot, do you support putting money towards, for example, WISE, which is a women's organization, as well as the Adult Learning Center. So we do put money towards outside services that enrich our community in the same way that we see these community spaces also enriching our community. So I couldn't actually find the number of books people take out in Hartford, but I think it's a lot. So let's just go with a lot, or a ton, as I put it.
Also nice to see Steve here in the audience. We're pretty soon going to be transitioning into some questions about the way the budget will evolve, and hopefully this can go straight into Steve's ear. He is, during these days, preparing the 2016-2017 budget to bring to the select board in about a month and a half.
Or sooner.
That'd be a novel breakthrough. So that is, Steve works in the Department of Administration. And normally when you think about organizational output and organizational services, you think about administration as being kind of like off to the side, actually not providing direct services to the people. However, I think that we can probably agree that having somebody in charge that we're all aware of and that we can pick up the phone and talk to, and a department that's there to support that function is an essential service provided to the town. And of course, it goes without saying that the business of overseeing all of the departments, managing all the departments, managing all the construction is sort of like the glue which holds it together and makes everything else possible. What's next? Becca.
Woo, and everything else. So we included a slide on the assessors, listers, finance department, and town clerk. One of the parts of having a town is that we need to make sure that we are assessing everyone's tax rate correctly. And that is a large part of the job of our assessor. But another part that you might not realize we have is a finance department. So as a town, anything money related that goes from town to consultant, that goes from internal payment or our payroll every time we sign it on a Tuesday meeting, that's done through our finance department. And if you've ever had someone in your family be the person doing the checkbook, you realize how important that person is and how valuable they are, even if they don't talk about how great they are all the time. So the finance department and the assessors and the listers play a key part in making sure this whole thing actually runs on time. And the last one, which I don't think we talked about enough, is our phenomenal town clerk. And I really wanted to just solidify the fact that you've got to realize that all of the services we're talking about, you're getting for that $150 a month. And one service you're getting that you maybe don't think about a lot is if you got married in this town, we're keeping your record safe, even if you don't want us to. If you have any information that's important financially that the town keeps, we're making sure that's safe, as well as running elections, which if you want your elections to be run appropriately, even if there's situations like a recount, for our town clerk to know that she's doing it correctly, that's how her budget breaks down in cost. So she plays a valuable role in our community.
So connecting up this presentation with the theme and title of this meeting here, which is Dialogue During a Time of Transition, the question that arises is, well, what's the problem here? Why are we in a time of transition? And the reason is basically threefold, so far as I understand it. And this has to do with the evolution of town spending over the course of the past 5 years. And there's been two pretty important trends that I've watched over the past 4 years sitting on the select board. And one of them predates my time quite a bit. So the first one has to do with reducing staffing. We have basically trimmed down our staffing in the town for the town municipal function to bare bones levels, and this is particularly impacting the Parks and Recs department. Tad can testify to that. and the and Public Works Department. So both of these departments are operating much less than they were 5 years, with much less staffing to do the same amount of work than they were 5 years ago. And at a certain point, it gets to a question of kind of push comes to shove. The next big factor that's we're coming up against at this time has to do with underfunded capital improvements. Now, we've seen the budgets that have come to Hunter and come to the select board show that are reflecting a capital improvement plan for the past 2 or 3 years have reflected numbers like between $1 and $3 million to be allocated for capital improvements. That money didn't go into the budget, and those expenses don't go away. Okay, so in other words, when the idea of a capital improvement plan is you put money aside to go into an account that is predicting some kind of improvement that you're going to need to make, and then when you get to the point of needing to make it, then the money's there and you get to make it without having to bond or take it out of the undesignated fund balance or whatever the other options are. If you don't put it there, then you very often can't make the improvement. So a really good example of that is what's happened with the Wrights Reservoir Dam. We were asked to put $600,000 in through the capital improvements plan, or some piece of that. For several years, we put 0 in 2 years ago. We put 0 in 1 year ago, and now the engineer's report says you must do it, and we are having to respond to that situation of dealing with sort of crisis with that. So the capital improvement plan is no joke, and we have not been able to fund it properly. We've been drastically underfunding it for years now. So if you combine those two trends with the third trend, which is that we have a history of tax increases. I left an X there, but the number is 6.3. We have a 6.3% tax increase per year for the past 4 years. So if you add those up, you get to 25%. 25% tax increase over the past 4 years explains why it was that our budget got voted down last time, which we as a select board interpret as a pretty clear message to say we can't continue with this trend of the 6.3% tax increase every year to come down the pike. So we have an interesting kind of situation, right? We cannot squeeze the system more by not funding things that are essential. We cannot reduce staff any more than we already have. We're already very bare bones situation, and yet we are kind of not taking care of some of our core obligations as a town. So that puts Steve in a situation right now where he's saying, okay, I have to figure out how to create a budget that's going to create a 5% tax increase or less this year. So that's what we want to talk about, and hopefully get some feedback from you about how we can frame this issue in terms of, are there some services perhaps that we could do without? Let's see what our next question is. Or can we continue to raise taxes at the same level? Or is it possible that we could increase the rate of tax increase? Now notice I'm not talking about increasing taxes. Taxes are going to increase. I'm talking about increasing the rate of tax increase. So from a yearly rate of tax increase of 6.3, we could go up to 8.3 and be able to answer some of these demands that we're talking about with regards to staff and capital improvements. We could continue not funding those demands and stay at a 6.3, or we could drop down to what seems to be the will of the electorate and come down to, let's say, 4 or 5.3% tax increase, thereby shaving significant money off of our budget to the tune of maybe $250,000, something like that. I'm going to get the easel. Maybe there's a pen.
I think there's another pen.
And you can facilitate from here.
So I'm going to recommend if we could, 6 to 8 minutes max.
Yes.
Okay.
Great, okay, so the first question is, and I think we were kind of thinking about like a show of hands more for this one, but the second question is far more important because that's the one where we ask for your suggestions. So maybe we should just skip the first question with the raising of hands.
Good call, Becca.
Collaboration. So what opportunities do you see in saving money on the town budget?
feel like I should know this, but I have to ask. The 6.3% includes the increase that happens with education, or is it the separate?
No, this is purely municipal budget that we're talking about, yeah.
Good question.
Okay, so one of the things that was clear at the town meeting is that people had no idea what the percentages actually meant dollar-wise. And once they started talking about, well, this means it's gonna be an increase of $20 on your tax bill, oh, okay, you know, they really had no idea. So you could talk about a 20% increase, you could talk about a 0.5% increase. If they don't know what that means on their bottom line, they really aren't interested in any increase. So I think going forward, and I understand that, because I'm covering the municipal world where 2% is this and whatever, but to really make it clear to people what it is in dollars, you know, this is what you get, this is what you're missing, you know, but this is what it actually costs. The percentages are kind of random for a lot of people to really understand. And it gets a little more complicated when you start taking money out of undesignated fund balance, not knowing what you're losing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we were gonna get another firefighter to hold 2 ambulances at bay. No. You know? So again, I think, you know, people are always gonna say, well, I wanna be safe, I wanna have public safety, I wanna have this, I wanna have that. They want all of the services, but they also don't want the increase in money.
So are you saying that you could say on a $200,000 house, this is what a 6% increase would be?
I think it would help the
And it
conversation.
clarifies it,
Yeah.
just to clarify so it's more concrete.
We're talking approximately $12 a month.
See, and that's different to me than like when people are sitting there trying to wrap their heads around, what is it really? You know, how much is it? Because when you talk percentages, it does get confusing for the general residents.
And your biggest obstacle is that last year we took $375,000 out of the undesignated fund balance that is not available this year. So that's gonna raise your taxes 2.5 cents, just in order to deliver the same service today that you had yesterday, or July 1 that you have June 3rd.
Yeah, and I think those kind of conversations are really, really important because we can talk all day about this service or that service, and I think it becomes a little clouded, you know, what the priorities are. I think that people are seeing a lot of projects going on that either no longer have kids in school or no longer have, you know, the need for, you know, big fields or whatever, and they've paid for a couple of schools to be built, you know, and then they stop looking at those as priorities. So, you know, just the whole piece of it. And I think it would have been interesting to see how the town budget gone before the school board, how that all would have shaken out. Because by the end of the day, I was along there.
Plus putting it in dollar and cents. I can't strive enough how important that is, because people aren't gonna sit there and figure it out. You know, you coming up with a $12 figure versus 2% or 6% is scary, because they're looking at their whole tax bill. They're not looking at the 1/3%, that's the town municipal budget. And I think that's really, really important to strive for this next time around.
So let's say that this is presented in the way that you will see a $12 increase. Are there places that people see in their community as opportunities where we do have this pivot point, where we are understaffed and we're also providing the same level of services? Are there services and opportunities people see more broadly?
I actually am a slightly, if you don't mind. The question I think you asked in part is wrong, question asked, because there's two issues. One is services, the other is the capital improvements that we need to deal with. And I would point out that right now we are at an all-time historic low in terms of the cost of borrowing money. It has never, ever been cheaper historically to borrow money. So to deal with some of the issues that we have put off forever, and which have ended up costing us more money because we haven't dealt with them, this is the time that we really ought to be thinking about doing that. And so I really would raise the sort of, what do we want to do about the capital budget, and can we take advantage of the fact that capital is incredibly cheap right now? The other question is, what do we do about services? And I would divide the two. And I think we ought to be looking at, as a town, how we go and borrow money and how we pay it off over a period of time, and how, if anything happens, which we've seen historically in terms of inflation, as time goes on, that money we will spend will be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So I would think we would have that conversation in addition to the conversation.
That's a really
about
good
services.
point. Okay, so I think I saw your hand first.
For example, you could borrow, just to use round numbers, 30-year money at 3%, or 15-year money to be a little more conservative. And maybe town-wise as well as the schools, you know, put all the eggs in one basket so it's very clear what will be needed to make this town better, maintain and or better over the next 10 years. Maybe one bond issue, maybe it could be divided between town and school, or whatever. But the point is, I think you want to know what's coming, and having a capital budget that's
As a
funded
taxpayer.
for both the town and the school district, so that people aren't surprised by increases. Where you can pre-fund, like maybe the dam goes, or maybe there's some big things that could potentially go. And that's much more understandable if you can borrow it today at 3%. And then foolishly, maybe 5 years from now, it's at 7%. Because if you look at the history of municipal bond rates over the last 20 years, the point made is a totally valid. This is
No, yeah.
by far the best time to borrow money
Yeah.
in our lifetime.
And we have been taking advantage of that. In other words, we've been coming to the public with pretty hefty bonds for the past few years, to the tune of $7 million and that kind of bonding.
By the way, if you buy capital equipment, which helps you reduce the need for people, that's a wise investment at the moment. So if there was a tool that the Public Works Department could buy, it would make it easier for them to do their job, that they would be able to continue to do it at the level of staffing they have now, because you're not going to be able to find the money to pay for somebody and their retirement and their health care and so forth. But maybe you can keep the current staff and make their life a little bit more pleasant by providing them with the equipment that they need to do their jobs so they can do it. That's,
No, that's a really good point, but I want to make sure that we talk to a few more people.
I think seeing your little slide about what that $150 is compared to your AT&T bill, your Comcast bill, whatever, is like really important, because we may all gripe when Comcast raises our rate or when AT&T raises our rate, but we don't stand there and go, no, it's okay because I'm not paying for this anymore, or I'm going to vote it down because you increased me by $12, but somehow when it gets to taxes, it's like, no, Comcast raised my rate, AT&T raised my rate, this is it. The town's not getting any more money. And I think, we all have to realize that it's us, that we're getting services, that, that you want the road plowed, that you want that pothole filled, that, so sometimes you just have to deal.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good comment.
Scott, how are we doing on, can we take 2 more?
You can take 2 more, and then we're done.
Lainey,
I
go
think
ahead.
what's lacking within the town of Hartford over the last few years is that bonding has been a great tool for us to go about spending, for our spending needs. However, the bond issues, I don't think have been presented to taxpayers in a way that they can understand them. When you present a bond issue at the town meeting time, and when it's time for people to vote on a budget, it's not explained how much it's going to affect your tax bill over the next few years. And we have bonds that run out there for quite some time. And I think it's very important for people to understand that this is going to impact your tax bill in the next few years till this is paid off by X amount of dollars. That's very important for people to understand that, and to understand that if you vote yes for this, you will see an increase in your tax bill based on your yes vote. And people don't understand that, and that's why your educational tool is missing at voting day. And it needs to be stressed.
Yes, and I think we have, David, do you want to go ahead?
My comment is that I get concerned when I see 4 or 5% a year in a world where people's earnings are not going up. Right?
And zero.
And if you look at the composite average over the last 25 years, which I was challenged to do last year as a landlord, for example, the real number is about 2.3%. And of of course, we know how healthcare being way outside the boundaries on that is causing us major problems. I'm just wondering when we're confined to, or resigned to 4 or 5%, if we're being cost effective or not. And I would footnote that by saying I have no problem philosophically paying taxes, and even at my age where I would say, well, I don't do this and I don't do that. A lot of people paid for me before, and I'm going to pay going forward. So I don't have a problem with that. I just get concerned when it gets ahead of our earning power.
So one of the things that, can I?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Go on to this next. One of the things that we've realized is that there's a lot of things in our budget that we actually cannot, by law, eliminate. And so there's like some areas of wiggle room, and there's some areas that are more or less fixed. And the difficulty is that a lot of the areas that are more or less fixed are the things that people most don't want to give up. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here of some services that could conceivably be cut. These are potentially cuttable services, and what they would save us. They're each going to save us in the vicinity of around 1.5% off of the budget. So it's going to reduce the bill like $9 or something like that. Take a look at these. We could save $254,000 by not salting the roads. This is an interesting thing to consider. We could save $211,000 by eliminating youth programming. We could save $229,000 by eliminating all of the social services and the senior center. Or we could save $231,000 by eliminating curbside recycling pickup and sidewalk plowing. So you can see what kinds of, and this is after kind of looking at the budget and saying, okay, what could we possibly give up? These things are pretty painful things to give up, right? I think if, so anyway, we're not in a situation where there's enormous things where we can just draw a red line through it and say, it's gonna go.
We're not Detroit.
Right. We're not.
Besides, they have way bigger impacts supporting social services. And we just listened to Chief Caston talk, and there's not a person in this room that didn't agree that those services are in more need all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What you can't do is, you can't scare. You gotta be very careful with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because that pisses people off.
So I think the hope here is to say that we are in a really difficult position as a community and as a town, where we're seeing over and over again, people don't want to see more tax increases. But as a community, we've really gone down to bare bones on staffing levels, as well as the services that we provide are still in place. So at the end of the day, what our hope was to say, look at what you get for the amount that you pay in taxes, and are there suggestions that folks see for services that they no longer want to see, to give us some information. So at the end of the day, thank you for your participation.
Before we close up, I just wanted to hear from Steve Locke if you have any reflections or comments on what has been said, or if it's consistent with your experience of looking at the budget, or if there's
so all the departments have turned in their budgets. I'm under a task to bring in a 3 to 5% increase, which is basically 3 to 5 cents on the tax rate. It will be very challenging to do that without eliminating services. The 375, we're starting with a $375,000 hit because we're not being able to take the money out under the designated fund balance. So we'll hit that goal, but it's going to be with some pain. And so, because what do you want to give up?
Anyway, this highlights the importance of forums like this, because in a situation of transition, this is a time when we need to pull together and be able to think together about what is most important to us.
And I think it probably goes, we've heard it, if we can do a better job of explaining what the impact on your $250,000 home is of this, because 10% increase sounds like a big number, but 10%, it is a big number, I'm not minimizing it, but knowing its actual impact on your tax bill, it goes
goes a long ways. And we see our bond debt is our bond payment is over $1.2 million this year. Never been that high. So, and the interest payment on that, and I know the money's cheap, but still you're paying $400,000 or $500,000 worth of interest this year that you weren't paying, last year.
To Peter talk, because as Rebecca said, the town budget's 1/3, the school budget's 2/3. I think the townspeople really need to hear that this town is looking at consolidation very, very actively, because that's a huge part of our budget. And if we can any way reduce, I think it's gonna be there. The elderly are not gonna vote for decreases in police or ambulance. They will vote to decrease the school budget, plain and simple, because that's where they see they don't have kids in school. That's where they see they can save. So I think it's really important that this town take an active role at looking at whatever they can do.
This is where a town manager with some good quality Six Sigma skills, some quality management skills, and doing more with less is the key to the future of the town of Hartford. We really need to have someone with a good Six Sigma background, with cost-cutting measures, and with quality improvement. Doing more with less.
Go first in town meetings.
They do this year. I will jump up on that stage if I have to.
They will this year. It's an alternating thing.
Oh,
We're gonna call that the last word. Sorry that we can't continue on. I've got to hand it over to Scott.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So right, I don't know, a few years back, we got together to talk about saving lives. We got together to talk about how this community can come together to support one another on all fronts. There's been a lot of work done in this town. Tonight was great. There's a lot of information in this town. Our talking to each other and communicating with one another is critical, no matter what the topic. So really, there's a lot of information, right? So I was trying to get them off.
Sorry.
No, not just you all, but how do you do this, right? So CHTV is here. It'll be broadcast. Find the link, find the clip. We'll ship it on the website and so forth. You can help us to get the word out by sharing the link. Invite these people into the Rotary, into the Senior Center, and so on and so forth. One thing I heard often is, I did talk once really about not only having the circle tonight, but having both boards be up here together. Because what I heard at a lot of town meetings is, let's hear together, because all of it comes out of our same pocketbook. So I think we're getting there, People are in the same room and we're having these conversations. And geez, to hear about the services that we have and what we might have to give up. And we know that Hartford, with heroin and all the mental illness that's going on, we have a lot to do to take care of our youth, and all of us. We really do. So these are not easy conversations. People coming out on a night like tonight is fabulous. All the presenters. The VA offered us this spot. So kudos to the VA. However we do that, we will. And just to tell you kind of what else is on deck. In November, the HCC board meets again. January, we're having another forum, and that January meeting is working hand in hand with Marlborough College. They'll be here that night. And I think we're going to do strategic planning of 20 to 30 people of some sort. But we'll be in touch, right? We're still on the email and all of these, any number of things. I can't read my own writing, but I do have one quote. Mr. Briggs can have the floor for un momento.
Thank you, Scott. We've had quite a rigorous dialogue over the last 2 years on a nostalgia site called You Know You Grew Up in Hartford, yeah. And it gets to certain points where we can actually kind of get hot at each other, and it's fairly constructive, but most of the people on the site who are from around the country but still have heartfelt interest in Hartford say, well, this really isn't the place, and we're reticent to leave that because so many people are participating. If you put a little signal out there, it gets processed, and I think that's fundamentally good. Would you be inclined to advocate that we start embracing a Facebook site that's more tuned into the same threads that we're on tonight, so that we would more habitually go there and dialogue, just like we are in this room? I don't know how you all feel about Facebook as a medium, but I find it very effective.
It's effective, but it can be damaging. I've seen it in a lot of ways. I've seen it with kids, and I've seen it in our community. Some of the best, well-intended commentary that gets on there can be destroyed. People's feelings are hurt and so forth. I love face-to-face community stuff. I appreciate that, David, because that's the reality. And how do we, your question is, how do we reach people and keep them engaged? I'm gonna stay away from that for the moment, but that's the heart of it, because what we're trying to do is get the message out, get accurate information out. If you've never seen DeWitt Jones' 22-minute film, it's called Celebrate What's Right with the World. I just saw it 2 weeks ago. Educators see it all the time. He's a photographer for National Geographic, and I'm kind of stealing that for a moment. It's worth a watch. Go on his Facebook or go on his site, DeWitt Jones, Celebrating What's Right with the World. And I'll just pause on this moment for a moment to say, let's celebrate what's right with Hartford. And I think that's often what we try to do, and it's a good note to end on. So thank you all for coming out and celebrating.